Hello, welcome everyone. This is the International Peace Coalition. This is our 106th meeting that we've had in a row consecutively. My name is Anastasia Battle. I'll be your moderator today, as well as Dennis Small and Dennis Speed in the background, co-moderating. And I want to thank everyone who has been joining us in this process for 106 weeks. This has been a very trying time. I'm sure everyone's very aware of the attacks that have just happened. And if you feel confused, overwhelmed, and not quite sure what to make of the situation, well, that's exactly the intention of it. This has definitely been an operation to cause these kinds of problems and turmoil. So we're here to bring people together of all ideologies, above their ideologies. And I'm saying to you here, please take a moment and just realize that humanity is on the brink of extinction, and we have to come together despite all of our differences and problems and save mankind right now. Please also take a moment to share this invitation with your organizations. This is going to be a very important discussion today. Share it with your friends, your family. We should have as many people on and have a breakout today and get this across all over the world. So with that, I want to pass the torch over to Helga Tsepp-LaRouche, who is the founder of the Schiller Institute and the co-initiator of the International Peace Coalition. Please go ahead, Helga.
Hello to all of you. When we were discussing the upcoming IPC meeting for this Friday, we had originally intended to start the discussion off with the video made by Tulsi Gabbard, where she is warning of the immediacy of a nuclear war and what that would do. Now, when we discussed this, we thought it had to do mainly or primarily with the Ukrainian strike on the nuclear bombers inside the territory of Russia, and that she was referring to a somehow escalation around that, having visited Hiroshima. Now, this morning at 3 o'clock, I got a phone call and was informed that Israel had started to attack Iran. And that could very well be the reason which she may have had some pre-knowledge or inkling of. In any case, we are right now on the brink of World War III. It may have started already, and I'm not exaggerating my words, because we are now in danger of an escalation spiral, which, if not changed by some intervening reason, could indeed lead in the relative short term to a global nuclear war in which all of mankind would vanish. So what has happened is that Israel attacked both the nuclear sites or some of the nuclear sites in Iran, as well as some civilian places, killing the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Hussein Salami, and General Golamani Rashid, the commander of the armed forces, as well as certain extremely important nuclear physicists in Iran. Now, this very precise elimination of these individuals reveals that there was some real-time intelligence being provided. And at this point, it's not yet clear, did it come from cooperation on the side of the United States, the British, or other, so-called Western forces? And this is denied by Secretary of State Rubio, who said that the United States did not know, or that this was a unilateral action by Israel. President Trump somehow said that he was informed, but it is not clear if he tried to stop it or approve of it. In any case, this is now creating a heightened situation, where Rubio warned that if Iran now would, in retaliation, attack some of the US forces in the region, and there are about 90,000 US troops in different countries in the Middle East who are a target because they don't have any air defense. Now, Iran obviously is fully aware that and so is everybody else, that the aim of Israel is obviously to cause an action which then pulls the United States into the war, which then would, obviously open a spiral open-ended, because if the United States would be involved, I don't know if Russia and China would or could stand by idle when one of the key countries of the Belt and Road Initiative, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the BRICS would be attacked in this way. So the potential that this goes completely out of control is imminent. And, it is an open question in my mind, and maybe some of the world best experts who are on this discussion today will shed some light on it. For me, it is not clear, is President Trump knowledgeable? Does he think that, the targeting and bombing of what happened in Iran so far is part of the maximum pressure tactic? Does he think that he can, force Iran to finally make a deal, which he reiterated many times? He said he told them 2 months ago there was an ultimatum, they should make a deal, and he still repeated they should make a deal. Now, on what Iran is supposed to make a deal is the open question, because, as of our best knowledge, there was nothing in the behavior of Iran which would have legitimized such an attack. American intelligence had said repeatedly that Iran is presently not trying to acquire a bomb. There were these negotiations going on where several forces made very correct proposals how to defuse the situation, not least that the Russians, in particular Vice Foreign Minister Ryabkov, suggested the concrete help of Russia to intervene between the United States and Iran by offering to take some of the enriched uranium and then, basically diffuse the whole situation by providing Iran with the possibility of peaceful nuclear energy, but not having the beyond the limit enriched uranium. So that all obviously didn't yield the necessary result. And now the big question is, Iran for sure will retaliate in some form. I think no country can take this repeated attempt to decapitate the entire leadership without responding. Now, if the Iranian response on Israel is going to be, as one can expect it to be, then naturally the big question is, will the United States immediately jump in and you have the escalation to World War III? So I think what is required now is, and all kinds of people, came out defending the right of Israel to self-defend itself, which has not been at stake. I think that is one thing one has to note very clearly. So from the standpoint of the UN Charter, this is a completely illegal act of aggression. So, many other heads of state and forces are calling for restraint, not to escalate the situation. But it seems to me that this is the kind of situation where, a completely different approach is required. Because if you look at it at the larger context, we have seen in the recent period a massive targeting of those countries of the global south, namely the BRICS countries, who are trying to form an own economic system which is more based on economic justice and the equal chances of every country to develop. We have seen targeting of South Africa, of Egypt, of Brazil, Argentina, probably the most far gone case, naturally Russia and China. And the underlying issue is the fact that the global south is trying to get a new economic system. So I can only touch on these things in the background, but I think the complexity of the situation is such that our old demand, that which was demanded by the International Peace Coalition from the very beginning and the Schiller Institute after the so-called special military operation in Ukraine started, that we have to catapult the whole discussion into a new paradigm. And we have been calling for a new global security and development architecture, which must take into account the interest of every single country on the planet. And we should not forget that, it is Israel which has probably around 200 nuclear bombs. Iran has none. And, you could argue that one of the reasons why there is even the attempt by Iran to, at times having wanted to have a nuclear weapon, which they in the last period have not done. And there was actually even a statement by Khamenei, the supreme religious commander, that Iran is not going to go for nuclear weapons. But one could possibly argue that the fact that there is this unbalance in the Middle East was the reason why the whole situation developed the way it did. So therefore, whatever the experts are now going to discuss, and we should listen to all of their arguments and try to get out with this session of the IPC, as Anastasia said, the widest possible, because if you don't mobilize the population in the world now, there may not be another chance. But that the bottom line, from my point of view, is that we absolutely have to grow up as a mankind. We have to reach a situation where we stop these geopolitical games and arrive at a new security and development architecture in the tradition of the Peace of Westphalia, and resettle the affairs of the world in a peaceful way, or we are risking our own self-destruction. So that is all I wanted to say in the beginning.
Thank you, Helga, for that opening and very sobering overview of what's happening in the world. I'd like to bring in Mr. Bhadrakumar, who's a former Indian diplomat to the USSR and held many leading positions in the Indian Foreign Ministry, including working with nations like Iran and other countries in Southwest Asia. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Bhadrakumar. Please go ahead. You have the floor. Oh, you're muted, my friend. I just sent you a prompt to unmute. If you select that, it should unmute you. Try again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Now, thank you very much, and particularly a word of gratitude to Madam Helga for inviting me to make a presentation today. Where do I begin? This is a long story, the situation around Iran, and trying to build it around one particular scenario or one particular incident is unrealistic. That is the whole problem here. I never believed that this is about Iran's propensity or Iran's likelihood to develop nuclear weapons. Finally, today where we are, it is about Israel's security. And the contradiction is very obvious for all of us to see, because Israel is a major nuclear power, weapon power in the world, weapon state in the world. And that position it has acquired with the acquiescence or connivance of its allies, including the United States and European powers. So there's no moral ground involved here. Today, what we are talking about is that Iran, which has signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, is being asked to give up its privileges and prerogatives as a full member of the NPT family. All that it is asking, in fact, at the present stage of negotiations, from what we can glean from reports, is that it cannot have the same stature as Japan or Germany, for instance, as a nuclear, as a power with a threshold power, but exercising self-restraint, not developing nuclear weapons. And Iran has offered profusely, and is still offering, that it can have, that it's willing to give ironclad guarantees of whatever kind that is necessary as evolving through negotiations. So that's not the issue here. The issue is that Iran must be stripped of its privileges as a nuclear non-proliferation treaty member, and subject itself to completely to international inspection of whatever it is doing, as if it is a criminal, an outcast, and which would, we know, which would in geopolitical terms pave the way for permanent Israeli domination of the Middle East region. This is quintessentially the issue here. And President Trump is avoiding that. In fact, in my opinion, he is singularly responsible for this crisis also, insofar as in 2015, the deal that was negotiated, in the deal, per the deal, Iran had agreed to severely limit, circumscribe its nuclear program. The threshold of uranium enrichment was pegged at a very low level, from where realistically it's not possible even to contemplate developing a weapon program. And with full spectrum inspection, provisions for inspection by the International Atomic Energy Agency and so on. So, you know, this must be taken into account, that there is no moral ground for the international community to prescribe to Iran what it should do. And my great fear is that Iran might take a step in the direction of applying for leaving the NPT. That is the issue that is uppermost in my mind. The likelihood is very high in the present circumstances, unless Israel is restrained, which is something only the United States can do. And all it is today saying is throwing up its hands and saying that it is not the Trump administration, that it knew about this, but it is not party to it. And it is warning Iran not to touch the American military presence in Israel. So in other words, Iran must retaliate, or must respond to the situation with one hand tied behind its back. This is the gist of the challenge that Iran is facing today. I have dealt with Iran for something like 30 years in the diplomatic service, been there several times, including last year during the presidential election as an observer at the invitation of the Iranian government. And I have interacted through the years with the Iranian political elites in general. And I see very little likelihood of Iran giving up the nuclear enrichment, rights for nuclear enrichment, which it is reiterated even in the present day context. And if that is the issue that is there, it needs to be circumvented somehow. That is the diplomatic challenge. And only the United States can come up with that. I saw there are reports that some kind of a consortium of regional states could be involved in the processing of nuclear enrichment, uranium enrichment, so as a confidence-building measure, so that there is no misgiving, no scope for misgiving about what Iran is doing, coupled with, of course, the IAEA inspections and safeguard measures and so on, so that there are no scope for any misgivings. To my mind, it is a generous offer. it is an offer in the best spirit of compromise. So what is it that is preventing the Trump administration to make that as a basis for further negotiations going forward from coming Sunday? Now, I really hope the Sunday's consultations will go ahead as scheduled. But if the threats could be picked up in such a direction, with Russia coming into the picture, I am not yet willing to assess that this is a hopeless situation or that we are heading towards a world war. I think all is not lost. And if this is a brinkmanship, what is on display since this morning, then it is a different matter. If it is not a brinkmanship, then it is a different matter. But if it is a brinkmanship, I think diplomatically a way forward can be found still, to even including for Iran, Israel's satisfaction, because regional states would include close allies of the United States, traditional allies of the United States, and countries with which Israel has dealt with, and some of them even party to the Abraham Accords. So a way can be found, in fact, in that direction. So what is the justification for Israel to do what it has done today? I don't think it is any kind of threat perception from Iran. In fact, the copious literature that is available tells us that Iran has done nothing really, especially after President Trump came to power in a provocative manner to threaten Israel. In fact, Israeli commentators and Western commentators in general have been gloating over the fact that Iran is a much weakened power today, following the decimation of the groups that constituted the axis of resistance. I don't quite agree with that. That's beside the point. I'll just briefly mention why I don't agree with that kind of a reading of the situation, because axis of resistance is a phenomenon which will continue to be there so long as the root causes of the instability in the Middle East, or the Middle East crisis remains, which is the reality that the Palestinian problem is yet to be resolved. So whether Iran is there or not, there is this feeling it's in the minds of the people of the region, which will ignite resistance and which will ignite the desire for justice. So this is nothing. I know that this is nothing that Iran created, this spirit of resistance and justice, or that Iran is in a position to revive it if it has been subdued by Israel through military moves in the past 1 year. Hamas, Hezbollah, these are all manifestations of a certain situation that arose in the region, where the natural rights of the inhabitants of the region have been violated, and there is no justice forthcoming from any quarter. And they took to this kind of a attitude. So Iran is in a position, in fact, on the other hand, paradoxically, to influence these groups to moderate themselves and become party to an overall solution, if there is a solution possible and if there is a process evolving out of all this. I saw, therefore, President Trump's overture, President Trump's outreach, rather, to Putin on June 3rd, in the context of the Ukrainian attack on the nuclear force on June 1st, just 48 hours after that, to step in and lend a helping hand on the Iran negotiating process, dialogue process, which is underway. I thought it was a breakthrough, because Iran has, I know for a fact that Iran has, Russia has considerable influence in Iran, And this is not in terms of any kind of geopolitical construct of, Russia, China, Iran, and so on, challenging the West and all that. This sort of literature is plentiful. I never bought into that because these are all countries in their own way, which have treasured their strategic autonomy. And they have specific interests in the situation. And they're not going to gang up like that for the sake of the fun of it, the thrill of it. So I don't believe in that. But at the same time, there is a congruence of interest between Russia and Iran. By the way, their strategic treaty is by no means contemplating the spirit of a mutual defense pact in times of war. Just like, for example, the old Soviet Union had with India, or Russia has with North Korea. That is not the kind of treaty that is there. The alchemy of the relationship is very different. And please do remember this, that about 15, 20 years back, when the Bushehr nuclear power plant was under construction and Iran had made the advance payment to Russia, nonetheless, Russia dragged its feet for over 10 years or something at the behest of Israel and the United States. So it's a complicated relationship, but nonetheless, it is a welcome development in the present context because, like in the case of the JCPOA, Russia is in a position to offer the requisite component for one segment of the settlement, if a settlement is possible. Like I said, if a group of countries come together, form a consortium, which will be in charge of the uranium enrichment process, and that is under very strict scrutiny by the international community, then whatever is the enriched uranium can be transferred and stored in Russia. Russia has the facilities for it. Russia is capable
for interrupting, Mr. Bhadrakumar. Just because we have a very long, tight schedule for a number of people, would you mind summarizing? And we will come back.
Yeah, I will therefore summarize this way, that I do not think that there is a reason to be there is a doomsday scenario shaping up here. I therefore even suspect that to an extent the Trump administration is not thinking that this was a bad thing to have happened, what happened this morning. The question therefore is how Iran is going to proceed from here. It's a very proud nation. It is a civilization state, and it is certainly not going to accept a situation where its territorial integrity and sovereignty has been violated. Its national honor, its top leaders have been killed. So it will retaliate. So the international community must understand this. And the United States in particular, therefore, must exercise self-restraint and do not jump into this in any form. But I don't think it is inevitable still that in the present situation that we are moving into or that we have moved into a World War-like situation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bhadrakumar, Mr. Bhadrakumar, for your analysis and your very in-depth knowledge from your many years of experience. We greatly appreciate that. And I just want to let people know who we have in terms of a lineup. We have Dr. Theodore Postal, who is the leading nuclear weapons expert in the world. We have Larry Johnson, former CIA officer and co-founder of Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. Ray McGovern, former senior analyst, U.S. CIA, founding member of the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And then we have a video statement from Gershon Baskin, who is an Israeli peace activist and has been in the middle of moving Israel into the population there towards peaceful protests. And then hopefully an on-the-ground report from Egypt if we are able to get good reception. So I just want to let people know. And if we can keep our comments to 10 minutes or less, then that'll give us enough time for discussion towards the end. So thank you very much. And hopefully we can keep people on for this discussion. So next, I'd like to go to Mr. Theodore Postel, Professor Emeritus of Science, Technology, and International Security at MIT, and the leading, in my opinion, the leading nuclear weapons expert in the world. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Postel. Oh, you're muted, my friend.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure I'm the leading expert, but I do know something about the subject, and I'll try to cede some of my time to Larry Johnson and Ray McGovern because some of my concerns really have to do with intelligence matters that both of them know more about than I do. Iran, one of the things I think that is important that I haven't seen discussed much is that Iran really wants to avoid making a nuclear weapon. And because it's very clear that the leadership of Iran understands that if they have a nuclear weapon, they pose a nuclear threat to other countries in the Middle East. It's not simply Israel. I mean, there's Saudi Arabia, there's Egypt. And once you have a nuclear weapon capability, everybody gets hyper alert. And so Iran's policy is highly rational. That is to say, they've thought it through. And to their credit, they have made a good decision that they want to avoid becoming a nuclear weapon state. Now, there is certainly internally people arguing against maintaining that position. And one of the sure ways to give those people more influence is to attack Iran in a way that puts Iran in a position where the argument for it getting a nuclear weapon can be more strongly made. I don't believe that the reasoning that leads to the conclusion you don't want to be a nuclear weapon state, given that you're Iran, but this political pressure will be real. And the one way to really unite people in a country where there is disparate internal points of view is to attack that country. So I think we know from all historical experience that bombing a country brings the population together against the external adversary. And I think what the strategy that Israel is following, assuming they have a strategy. In fact, I don't believe they have a strategy other than to do things to protect Netanyahu from being forced out of government and tried as a criminal, which he is. But I think at this point, the greatest danger is that Israel's actions will unleash social and political forces within Iran that drive it to a decision to go ahead and build a nuclear weapon. And that would be very bad for Iran. It would be very bad for the whole Middle East, and certainly also bad for Israel. I think I'll curtail my comments here, but I would like to just take 1 second to point out a separate issue, which we were going to talk about, which was the violation of a sacred commandment of the Cold War, not to attack the strategic forces of other nuclear weapons states. That is what occurred on June 1 when Ukraine attacked 5 strategic bases in Russia, that had nuclear strategic bombers of Russia housed there. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but I do think this needs to be dealt with in another session, because Russia could have legally responded by using nuclear weapons against the UK and United States, who were definitely behind the attack. There's no question that the United States and the UK were behind the attack. That deserves some discussion and elaboration. And fortunately, Putin is a very strategic thinker, and he understands that a nuclear attack would, of course, result in an uncontrolled escalation leading to the destruction of civilization. So fortunately, there is one leader among many who are reckless and irresponsible, but one leader who has shown that he knows what he's doing, that is keeping this thing from escalating out of control. So that's a separate area that I don't want to get missed, even though we have this extremely dangerous problem that's now evolving. And I'll turn it over to Ray and Larry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Postal, for that overview. I'd like to go to Larry Johnson, who is former CIA and co-founder of the Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. Go ahead, Larry, you have the floor.
Well, actually, let's be accurate. I was not a co-founder, though I was an early member. Ray, this was Ray's baby, and he deserves the full credit for it. I'm not one to take credit for what other people do. I'll have to keep this short because I apologize in advance. I have another commitment at noon. Point number one, Iran's air defense system failed. Israel achieved a major success in hitting targets, but a lot of them were civilian targets. We need to sort of withhold any sort of final judgment because a lot of the initial reports that are coming out, some of them I'm sure are AI generated and not necessarily accurate, just as we saw with Ukraine's attack on the Russian Strategic Air Force, claiming 41 planes, and they showed the images, and everybody was saying, yeah, it happened. And then it turns out it was really like 3 to 5 aircraft total that were actually damaged, and most of those were out of service. So it was not quite as bad as it appeared initially. That said, this attack was carried out with the full knowledge and participation of the United States, in my judgment. I just quote Donald Trump this morning in the New York Post, quote, "I always knew the date Israel would attack. I know everything." His words. And then he went on to say, the same people, the Iranian officials we worked with the last time, many of them are dead now. He's celebrating this. The Israelis have been doing the dance of celebration and noting that they had communications with the Iranian Air Force, and they tricked them. They went into negotiations and they tricked them to get information so they could attack. Gee, what does that sound like? Oh, the murder of Hassan Nasrallah, who was at a particular meeting site, meeting with other senior Hezbollah officials in order to discuss a peace proposal, a ceasefire. And that was used in order to target him. There's a pattern emerging here that Israel cannot be trusted in any kind of negotiation whatsoever, nor can the United States. The United States is playing this double game right now that, oh, we didn't know anything about this. The same that Trump did with Putin. Oh, we didn't know anything about that attack on the airfields. Nonsense. I'm throwing the BS rag on that. This is a devious, vile policy that's underway. Iran will have to declare war. There's not a negotiated outlet for this. This was an unprovoked attack, but in the same way that the Japanese were dancing and celebrating on December 8th, 1941, what I fear is that Israel's going to encounter something of the same fate. Because it's not like Israel's only fighting now Iran. And there have been continued, as we're talking, there are still explosions going on. Shiraz is being attacked, an airfield down south. There have been attacks on at least 10 different cities and airfields, nuclear facilities that are above ground. What the media is not talking about are all the nuclear facilities and weapons facilities that are buried deep below ground and are not easily penetrated. So I was flying through Dubai Wednesday. I arrived there late Wednesday night, and I received information from someone with access that they fully anticipated Iran's strikes from a U.S. source, that Iran's strikes were going to start that night. So the United States was fully aware of this. And this has direct implications with U.S. relations with Russia going forward, I believe. Because accordingly to Trump, the last talk, oh yeah, we talked about how Russia could be helpful with Iran. I don't think Russia's going to be in a big rush now to be, quote, helpful with Iran after the United States has now established the principle we can attack whoever we want, wherever we want, with whatever we have. That's the principle and the message being sent. And unless particularly the Arab and Muslim world come together and rise up against this and draw a line in the sand, this is going to escalate, and it will get out of control in my judgment. Thanks.
Thank you, Larry, for that analysis. Ray McGovern, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. I too need to be gone by noon, so I'll try to be short here. I see the Trump reaching out to Russia, specifically to Putin in their last telephone conversation, to see if he can help with Iran, as very, very curious. It came out of the blue. And I think Trump is faced with a divided bunch of advisors. They are the neocons who perpetrated this thing. Trump may or may not have known exactly. He's claiming that he does know because he wants to defend the Israelis. But what I see as a silver lining here is that this is such a threat to Russia and to China that I think that the Russians would be willing to talk to Trump about this and say, look, Mr. Trump, this comes as a big shock to us. You know, and this is something that Ted Postel mentioned, and correctly, Israel has no strategic vision. Netanyahu's strategic vision is quite simply to stay out of jail. I see this as one of the prime motivating forces for the timing of this attack on Iranian facilities. The big question, of course, is whether our Secretary of State can say, well, we didn't know anything about it and be credible, or whether it'll become clear that the U.S. did know chapter and verse. I don't know how this strike took place. Earlier, one thought that they needed tankers to refuel, maybe twice some of these aircraft. I don't know if the Israelis have those tankers now, or whether it's as before they depended on U.S. tankers. So U.S. complicity is somewhat in doubt here, despite the braggadocio coming out of Trump. Question is how the Russians will react. Will they see this as an Israeli attempt to hinder the burgeoning trust that is existing between the Russians and the U.S.? Do they want a continuation of the war in Ukraine? Because the more trouble they cause with those kinds of things, the better for Israel? I don't know the answers to that, but those are the big picture questions. Mostly, and this has not been said much except for what Ted Postel adverted to, and that is Netanyahu's political situation. He just barely escaped a parliamentary move against him. I think 2 votes or so, having scurried around. He may not be long for this time in office, and that will automatically mean, it seems to me from what I hear, that he'll end up in jail. So what else should be said here? Yeah, Witkoff talked to a bunch of Jewish supporters, and they were dancing in the street, as people have mentioned before. What else? What about nukes? Well, Israel has them. Okay, that's the big deal. Now, Iran this time is quite capable of retaliating against Israel. They have demonstrated that capability with hypersonic missiles. They can hit Israeli airfields, and there's no Patriot or other air defense system that can stop them. Will they do this? I think they will now. Yeah. Can the Israelis be restrained when things don't go quite their way? I don't know. But the big bugaboo here, of course, is that Israel has, as Helga mentioned before, most people think about 200 nuclear weapons. There is such a thing as the Samson option. And Netanyahu is completely self-centered here. If he'll start a war with Iran to stay in power and to stay out of jail, would he not use a nuclear weapon? My God, I hate to think about it. But everybody is watching this, and I think the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians themselves will have maybe a limited response until they see whether the big powers can come in and rescue the situation short of all-out war. That's all I'll say about that right now.
Great, thank you. And I just want to ask before everybody has to jump off, to get a response from Helga to what folks have said so far. Helga, why don't you respond to that?
Well, I think, there are many questions which cannot be answered, at least until some hard evidence has been produced. One of them is naturally, what is the real reason? And, I just want to repeat what I alluded to in my initial remarks, that if one does something, which the modern word for is contextualization of what is happening in the Middle East, as well as between Russia and Ukraine, I think the overall picture remains what I said, that I think a motive behind a lot of these things is the fact that there is an attempt to stop the rise of a new system. The BRICS plus and so forth. And I can only repeat that we as the, peace movement or the effort to create an international peace movement, I think apart from analyzing the particular crises, which is extremely important, and unfortunately, I tend more to be on the worried side that this could get out of control, simply because, for example, if in the escalation, Israel would attack the Iranian oil fields, we could have a blowout of the financial system. The oil price could go through the ceiling. I mean, there are many, many ways how this could go in an extremely volatile situation, completely out of control. And that is why I want to re-emphasize that we in the international peace movement, or as a significant part of that peace movement, must really not only analyze the situation, trying to be as correct by getting as many expert opinions mobilized to get the closest to the truth as possible, but I think I want to urge we have to also, provide an alternative. And I mean, look, Xi Jinping has proposed his 3 initiatives: Global Security, Development, and Civilizational Initiative, which is one way of formulating the Chinese way, what we call an international security and development architecture. And I'm absolutely certain that if it's not Ukraine, then it will be Iran, Israel, or tomorrow, Taiwan, China. As long as we are not resolving this underlying conflict and go in the direction of establishing a security and development architecture which in the tradition of the Peace of Westphalia takes into account the interest of every single country. And in this particular situation in the Middle East, that means both Israel, it means emphatically the Palestinians, and it also means Iran and all the other neighbors. And that can only happen through development, which is why we have been pushing this idea that the new name for peace is development, which brings up the OASIS plan and the whole idea to move to a new development architecture. So I just wanted to reiterate that because, you know, I'm afraid that because we are looking at an epochal change where one system, you know, is clearly going under, a new system is not yet established. There are efforts, but it's not yet decided. But I think that that is the gigantic task in front of us.
Thank you, Helga. Ray, go ahead.
Yeah, just very quickly, Helga, I want to thank you for alluding to Tulsi Gabbard's highly unusual, unprecedented statement about the dangers. What that says to me is she's afraid of these crazies with whom she has to deal and with whom Trump has to deal. And this goes back, she recorded that video a couple of weeks ago. So this is under discussion in the councils of U.S. government. There may be a mini nuke, not so bad. Maybe we ought to let Israel have its head. So it is tied to this, and it's incredibly unusual. First time ever a director of national intelligence made that kind of a statement gratuitously. That's what it means, it seems to me. And I'm sorry I have to leave this call now, but thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us, Ray. It's always a pleasure to have you. Okay, so let's continue with our agenda, and then we'll come back and we'll have plenty of time for discussion. And there's already tons of questions. I've got 11 questions that have come in and probably more on my phone that I haven't even looked at yet. So next I'd like to go to the video statement from Mr. Baskin, who's an Israeli columnist, social and political activist, and researcher of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and peace process. Please go ahead and play the video.
So this is Gerald Belsky with the Schiller Institute and the International Peace Coalition. And we have with us Dr. Gershon Baskin, a prominent negotiator and peace activist, who is in Paris for events prior to the UN conference on a two-state solution. So I wanted to ask you, Gershon, how you see this upcoming UN conference and also the events that you're attending in France right now prior to this in terms of promoting a two-state solution.
Right, so what's happening and what will happen next week is the initiative of President Macron, the French president, and Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, who have taken charge of the Global Alliance for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution that was created last September at the United Nations General Assembly and has subsequently met in Riyadh, in Belgium, in Brussels, in Oslo, in Cairo, and in Rabat. And this is really a follow-up. What we're doing here in Paris this week is a collection of civil society from Israel and Palestine, about 300 Israelis and Palestinians from the West Bank, from Gaza, from East Jerusalem, Israelis from all over Israel, have come together in Paris to deliver the firm message to President Macron that the Israeli and the Palestinian public are behind this effort to create a two-state solution. We have to force the message onto the international stage that there are partners for peace in Israel and Palestine, because the silent majority on both sides allow the continuation of the myth that each side claims that they want peace, but they don't have partners for peace on the other side. So we're here to demonstrate. There's the largest gathering of Israelis and Palestinians, perhaps in 2.5 decades, of people who are willing to stand up in public and say, we support the two-state solution. And we want to encourage President Macron for the French to recognize the state of Palestine, for call for the whole world to recognize both states, the state of Israel and the state of Palestine. We're fed up with the duplicity of countries that claim they support a two-state solution and only recognize one of the states. So we're calling for all the nations of the world to recognize both states. We want to provide input into the working groups that will take place at the summit in New York on the 17th of June. And we have in our Paris meeting, created 8 working groups to parallel the working groups that will take place in New York. The New York meeting is a meeting of governments. We want the voice of civil society to be heard by the governments that are going to be at their meeting in New York. And some of the people participating in this Paris meeting will be at the New York meeting as well, trying to get in, even though they've been told that this is a government meeting in New York and it's not really a civil society action.
You have been working for the last year with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and the former Foreign Minister of Palestine, Nasser Kidwa. I saw that Mr. Olmert in a Agence France press release made a very prominent statement to President Trump saying it is time to get on the phone or meet personally with Bibi Netanyahu and tell him the war has to end. I think that's a very good message to get to the president, given the fact that he has been going along with this policy of Netanyahu, even though he's obviously not happy and would like to end the war and the potential war with Iran. But would you like to elaborate any further on this statement of Mr. Olmert and the message he's getting to Trump?
Yeah, I'm really pleased that Ehud Olmert made that statement. I've been calling on President Trump for months now to tell Netanyahu that he needs to end the war. He needs to bring the hostages home. He needs to have an agreement with Hamas that's going to end the war. And then the Palestinian people and the Arab world, together with the international community, need to move forward on figuring out how to govern Gaza, to hold Palestinian elections, to unify the Palestinian polity into one unified body that's committed to making peace with Israel. This is very much reflected in a letter that Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas delivered to President Macron yesterday, which outlined in detail the steps that the international community and the Palestinians themselves need to make to bring this about. We all know that President Trump is the only person who can tell Netanyahu to end the war, and Netanyahu cannot say no to. This is the importance of that statement. And while I've made that statement for months, it obviously doesn't get the attention of President Trump. Perhaps when a former prime minister of Israel says it, and he said it in the New York Times, he said it this morning on France 24, he said it in the British media, he's saying it all over the world. Perhaps that will get the attention of President Trump, because we really need him to intervene now to end this horrible war. Too many people have been killed. Too much destruction has been done. Gaza has been wiped out. The humanitarian disaster in Gaza is beyond what anyone in the international community should be allowed to tolerate. And only President Trump can stop it. It has to be stopped.
Okay, finally, Gershon, I want to ask you about the fact that one of the panels or sessions at the UN conference, and what also is being discussed, I saw at the Paris Peace Forum conference that you're going to be attending, is the question of the economic viability of a Palestinian state and the other question of aid and reconstruction. And in both of these cases, the Schiller Institute has been promoting and would like to bring up at this UN conference the concept of creating food, water, electricity through what we call, as you know, the Oasis Plan, which would bring in massive increases of water through irrigation and desalination and then irrigation. And I might point out that because of the drop, well-known drop into the Dead Sea, you can actually create, by bringing in the water there, hydroelectric power. But I would like to ask you this question of economic viability. We've insisted that to get a two-state solution for decades, it can't just be a piece of paper. It has to be a living, concrete economic plan that would give people in both Israel and Palestine the idea of a future of growth and development. So instead of fighting over the land, we can divide the land, but develop the land. What do you think of that idea?
For sure, there needs to be a real concrete plan for economic development. The obstacles on Palestinian economic development that are placed there by the Israeli occupation need to be removed. There's a massive amount of work, $100 billion worth of work in rebuilding Gaza. And when you rebuild Gaza, we're not going to rebuild refugee camps. You have to build good quality housing for people and schools and public buildings and infrastructure. And of course, the nexus of energy and water here is crucial. We're in a region where energy and water can easily be available from renewable sources of energy and desalination of water. And there are lots of different plans that are on the desks of everyone concerned on how to do that, to significantly increase the amount of water available through the use of renewable energy. It's mostly a political question in that we need to remove flags from water. No country can own the water here in a common shared basin. The water belongs to all the people living between the river and the sea on an equal footing. There's no such thing as Israeli water and Palestinian water. It belongs to everyone. So we need to denationalize the issue of water. We need to put money into the development of alternative energy, renewable energy, so that we have the energy to desalinate the water that we need. It's all affordable today. It's not like it was 10, 15 years ago where it was too expensive to desalinate, or even battery storage of renewable energy was too costly. Even a few years ago, the costs are coming down all the time, and these need to be incorporated into the plans of rebuilding Gaza, removing Israeli obstacles on Palestinian economic development. Look, I say to my Israeli friends and fellow citizens that it makes no sense whatsoever for Israel to want to have poor neighbors. We should want our Palestinian neighbors to be successful, to be prosperous, to be able to provide the kind of lives for their children that we know provide for our children. That will be the basis of peace here, when we understand that when Palestinians do good, we all do good. This is we need to move to that win-win situation that we've never had here. We've always had the lose-lose situation, and as long as the other side is losing more than me, well, that's fine enough. But it's not fine enough. We need to have a win-win here, and it's easy to get there. This is not rocket science. It's so simple. The nexus on water and energy and environment and food provision, it all can be done very easily.
Finally, Gershon, I just want to just bring up what you've mentioned as the win-win situation. That is, of course, the concept of China's Belt and Road. It's the concept of what we're calling for as a new security and development architecture. What about the idea of bringing in all the countries of the region and many countries to collaborate for this win-win situation, so to rebuild this entire region?
Right. Israeli-Palestinian peace is not a bilateral venture. It has to be a regional venture. The countries that already have peace with Israel through the Abraham Accords, the countries of Egypt and Jordan that have peace with Israel for many years. We need to bring the Saudis in a very big way. Saudi Arabia is the most important Arab country today, and the Saudis are offering Israel normalization in diplomatic relations. The price for that is the creation of a Palestinian state. And this will create a regional architecture for security, for economic development, for prosperity for the entire region. Netanyahu once called Israel a villa in a jungle. If this dream comes true of Israeli-Palestinian peace in a regional architecture, we're going to have a villa in a very nice neighborhood that everyone will want to come and live in.
Well, thank you very much, Gershon. Thank you very much for your remarks.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. I was just grabbing a video here and looking for our friend who's in Egypt right now, but I unfortunately think that she has very bad reception. So there are many IPC participants who have been participating in the Freedom Flotilla and also now the March to Gaza, March for Gaza, which is happening right now. They have arrived, many have arrived in Egypt. There's thousands of people that are there. There's some people who are dealing with deportation issues. We've had some communication with the organizers, which has been important. They're trying to work with the Egyptian government in order to break the siege. I want to bring up a short video, which I received from Josephine Gilbo on why she's there and what they're doing. Let me grab that here. 1 second. There we go. So she brought a coalition of veterans with her to Egypt. Let me just play this for you.
U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Army, U.S. Marine Corps. We demand an immediate and permanent ceasefire and an end to the forced starvation.
An end to the illegal Israeli occupation.
Palestinian liberation. And an end to the sufferings. Free Palestine! We are the United States.
And then I'll read her statement, which she sent in just moments ago. She says, why we're marching to Gaza. As a veteran, I served 17 years in the U.S. Army. I've seen the cost of war and followed orders in defense of what I believe were just causes. We know now that nothing justifies the death and destruction of our fellow humans in the Middle East. Today, I'm marching to Gaza, not under orders, but out of conscience. What happens in Gaza is not just war. It's a humanitarian crisis. It's a genocide. Civilians are being killed, aid is being blocked, and entire families are being wiped out. I cannot watch in silence. The march isn't about politics, it's about people. It's about standing up for those caught in the crossfire, whose voices are silenced by bombs and blockade. As a veteran, I feel a deep responsibility to speak out against injustice wherever it occurs. My oath didn't end when I left the Army. It lives on in my actions. And today, that means walking toward Gaza to say, enough, the world must do better. So I want to thank Josephine Guilbeault for sending this in, and I want to extend my heartfelt desire to keep you and everyone there very safe. This is definitely a very dangerous period given what's happening right now. And we should just send this around as much as possible in order to keep a lot of eyes on this and to ensure people's safety. So thank you very much, Josephine, for doing that. So what I would like to do is we can now go into the actually, I want to go to Helga and to others in the panel who are still here, see if there's any responses to what has been said so far, and then we can move on to discussion. We have lots of people still on, sending in lots of questions. So please go ahead, Helga.
I just would like to add one thought to what I said just before, and that is that, what we are experiencing, especially in relationship to the events in Gaza, I think it's much more than just, a tragedy for the Palestinian people. I think if we as a world community cannot rectify or at least attempt to make good for, you can't do that, but, at least try to re-establish some living condition for all the people in the region. I'm afraid that the impact on the moral order of the world will be devastating. So I think we are called for, in a much more profound way than just the day-to-day politics, because I think what is at stake is the moral fitness of humanity to survive. And it is my firm belief that only if we go into something which used to be called natural law, that you try to establish a legality or legitimacy on the planet in correspondence with the actual call of creation, that we will get out of this. And that requires the best contribution of the most profound thinkers around the globe.
Great. Thank you very much. So what we're going to do is we're going to transition to the discussion period. I want to just make a general announcement to people who are on via YouTube, Twitter, various social media accounts. I know this is being broadcast widely. If you would like to partake in the discussion with the panel today, you must be registered. Please go to the schillerinstitute.com. There is a registration page right at the top. Register there and you will get the link for the Zoom meeting. And with that, Dave, just let me know when we've made the transition.